Hello, my name is Linda. I am 37 years old, and I work from home. My husband, Jonathan, and I have been happily married for 5 years. Although we do not have children yet, our dual-income household allows us to enjoy life's little pleasures, like traveling, dining at new restaurants, and making memories together. Since I transitioned to remote work, I have taken on most of the household responsibilities, which helps Jonathan focus entirely on his career. He works long hours, but over the weekends, he always finds time to help out at home. We have developed a comfortable routine in our marriage, where we both contribute in different ways, making sure neither of us feels overwhelmed. Jonathan and I first met at a group blind date event arranged by mutual friends. That night, out of all the people in the room, his warm, inviting smile immediately caught my attention. He had an easygoing nature that made conversation with him feel effortless. We dated for 3 years, gradually deepening our bond, before deciding to take the next step and get married. From the very beginning, Jonathan has been my greatest source of support. He always lifts my spirits with his encouraging words and unwavering affection. No matter what challenges we face, his presence reminds me that we can get through anything together. However, like any marriage, ours has not been without its difficulties. One of the biggest challenges comes from my in-laws. Jonathan's family owns a pasta shop, a business his father started 17 years ago after leaving his corporate job. Over the years, the shop flourished, expanding to several branches across the city. When I first met Jonathan's parents, they were dressed in flashy designer clothes, as if they wanted to make a lasting impression. The encounter took place when Jonathan and I visited them to announce our engagement. Right from the start, I sensed their disapproval. They made it clear that, in their eyes, any daughter-in-law would be acceptable as long as she could handle household chores and stayed out of trouble. Their blunt remarks about my financial background were unsettling, as they implied that I might not be wealthy enough to be a good match for their son. Jonathan did not hesitate to stand up for me, making it clear that their behavior was unacceptable. His firm response led to some improvement in their attitude, though their general coldness remained. Over time, I realized they were simply direct people, perhaps a common trait among business owners, especially those in the competitive food industry. Fortunately, Jonathan has always been on my side, reassuring me that we do not need their approval to live our lives happily. Even though our relationship remains strong, interactions with Jonathan's parents sometimes put a strain on our happiness. While I have learned not to take their words too personally, there are moments when their presence makes things difficult. Jonathan has apologized repeatedly for their behavior and assured me that we can keep our interactions with them to a minimum, limiting visits to major family gatherings. Jonathan's relationship with his parents has been strained for a long time. His father, once a struggling employee in the corporate world, became rather arrogant after his pasta business took off. He took great pride in his achievements and expected Jonathan to respect him unconditionally as the family's financial provider. As a result, he often interfered in Jonathan's career choices, disregarding his son's personal aspirations. Tired of his father's controlling nature, Jonathan moved out when he started college. Although he acknowledges that the profits from the family business helped pay for his education, he prefers to keep his distance from his parents. He has always been grateful for their financial support but has made it clear that he does not want to be bound by obligations to them. His plan has been to repay them one day while maintaining his independence. Since our marriage, I have had limited interactions with my in-laws, mainly because Jonathan and I do not have children yet, which has allowed us to avoid frequent family meetings. Our lives have been peaceful, but recently, my in-laws' business has fallen on hard times. In the past, a pasta shop could survive on good food alone, even if the owner was gruff or unwelcoming. But times have changed. Online reviews and social media now play a crucial role in a business's reputation. Customers expect not just good food but also excellent service. Unfortunately, my in-laws failed to adapt to this shift. Their once thriving shop started receiving numerous negative reviews, with complaints about the rude behavior of the staff and the lack of cleanliness in the restaurant. The initial success of their business led them to become complacent, and now they were facing the consequences. Their food, once highly praised, was now being compared to instant ramen. Negative reviews piled up, severely damaging their reputation. Despite these warnings, my in-laws stubbornly refused to change their ways, sticking to outdated methods. Eventually, this led to the closure of several branches, including their flagship location. When the reality of their situation became undeniable, My in-laws turned to Jonathan for help. It was surprising to see them, usually so proud, now desperate and humbled. "Jonathan, please help us. At this rate, we'll end up on the streets," his mother pleaded. Jonathan had seen this coming. His response was a mixture of frustration and tough love. "I warned you that arrogance would have consequences. You need to understand that customers are the backbone of any business. If you mistreat them, it will come back to haunt you. You dismissed my advice before, thinking I was being naive, but now you are seeing the results of your actions. You have to take responsibility for your own mistakes." His words shocked me. It was rare to see Jonathan speak so firmly, yet I knew his words came from a place of deep concern. His ability to hold his ground while still caring for his family made me admire him even more. Despite his refusal to offer immediate help, my in-laws returned a month later, looking utterly defeated. They had sold their designer clothes, their luxury car, everything they once flaunted, but it was still not enough to cover their debts. "Even after selling everything, we are drowning in debt. Jonathan, please. We don't have anyone else to turn to." Jonathan stood in silence, arms crossed, weighing his options. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He had every right to walk away, but these were still his parents. While I had never been particularly fond of them, seeing them so broken stirred a mix of emotions in me: pity, reluctance, and an undeniable sense of responsibility. After a long pause, I finally spoke up. "Jonathan, what if we send them a monthly allowance?" Both Jonathan and his parents looked at me in shock. They had not expected me to step in with such a suggestion. "Linda, are you sure?" Jonathan asked, his voice tinged with astonishment. I nodded. Despite everything, they were still family, and maybe, just maybe, this was our way of helping without enabling their mistakes. I looked at Jonathan and reminded him gently, "You've always wanted to find a way to repay your parents for supporting you through college, haven't you?" He hesitated for a moment, his expression thoughtful, before giving a slow nod. "Well, I might have said something like that before." His parents, sensing an opportunity, took this moment to plead once more. Bowing their heads deeply, they implored, "Jonathan, please, we're working tirelessly to pay off our debts. Could you at least help us cover our living expenses?" Jonathan paused, considering their request carefully. After a few moments of silence, he finally agreed. At first, he decided he would send them $3,000 every month. However, knowing how much they were struggling and wanting to help them rebuild their lives more quickly, I suggested, "Jonathan, maybe we should increase that to $3,500 a month." He was unsure at first, telling me that $3,000 should be enough, but I was insistent. My career had grown beyond my regular job. I had become skilled in investing, particularly in stocks and real estate. Over the years, I had built a significant amount of wealth, enough to buy luxury apartments and make a stable income from renting them out. Jonathan's parents had no idea about the true extent of my earnings. In reality, my annual income had grown to around $580,000, which gave me plenty of financial flexibility. I chose not to share this information with them, preferring to quietly support them through Jonathan. It wasn't just about helping his parents, it was also about easing Jonathan's mind so he wouldn't have to worry so much about them. Over time, my in-laws began to express their gratitude. During one of their visits, they thanked Jonathan profusely. "Jonathan, thank you so much. Because of you, our lives are finally becoming more stable." Seeing their appreciation was heartwarming. It felt good knowing we were making a real difference in their lives. More than anything, we hoped this support would motivate them to find jobs and eventually get back on their feet. But as the weeks passed, something became clear: they weren't making any effort to seek employment. A month went by, and instead of showing any progress, they started visiting our home more frequently, especially on weekdays. At first, their visits seemed innocent. "Our food expenses are really adding up. Linda, would you mind giving us something to eat?" they asked. At first, they would simply eat and leave, but soon, their behavior changed. They started staying longer, making themselves comfortable on the couch after meals. Eventually, they even began requesting desserts. One afternoon, I finally asked, "Is this arrangement working for you, or do you think we need to make some changes?" I was growing increasingly frustrated. Their frequent visits were beginning to affect my work. "I have a job too, so I'd really appreciate it if you didn't stay for too long," I told them, hoping they would understand. Instead of acknowledging my concerns, they exchanged amused glances and laughed dismissively. A job? But you're always at home. If you're going to make something up, at least make it believable, one of them scoffed. I realized they had no understanding of remote work. I attempted to explain it to them. I work from home using my computer, just like I would in an office. But they brushed it off as nonsense. We don't get all that computer stuff, they said dismissively. No matter how much I tried to explain, they didn't seem to care. Worse yet, their demands became more frequent and entitled. Linda, we're out of tea, go buy some more. Don't you have any snacks? Get us some rice crackers or something. It wasn't just the constant interruptions, it was the way they spoke to me. Their remarks became sharper, more condescending. What a useless daughter-in-law, for someone who stays at home all day. You sure are inconsiderate. They had promised to look for jobs and work toward paying off their debts, but it became clear they had no real intention of doing so. Instead, they continued relying on Jonathan's money while treating me with disrespect. They were careful, though. They always made sure to leave before Jonathan returned from work, perhaps to avoid his questions or his disapproval. One day, I had enough. I stood my ground and firmly told them, "Please leave now." They were stunned at first, but their shock quickly turned to anger. "Who do you think you are? A mere wife giving orders to your husband's parents?" they snapped. "And you're just a housewife living off Jonathan's income. Stop pretending you have a job." I clenched my fists, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not just a housewife. Your outdated views don't define me." Their eyes darkened with malice before one of them sneered, "You should just leave." "What?" I asked, caught off guard by their words. "That's right, if you weren't around, Jonathan would send us more money. You know we're only getting $3,500 a month, right? That's not enough." I was speechless. No matter how much we helped them, it was never enough. Their sense of entitlement had completely blinded them to the effort we were making. As I stood there, their expressions turned cruel. "Why are you just standing there? Start packing your bags already. Didn't you hear us? Get lost, you parasite of a wife." Their words cut deep, but I refused to let them see my pain. Instead, I took a deep breath and responded calmly, "Understood, I'll pack my things and leave." For a brief moment, they were caught off guard, but then, smug smiles spread across their faces. "Finally, we'll have Jonathan all to ourselves. Things will be much smoother now." Ignoring their cruel words, I began gathering my belongings. That night, when Jonathan came home, I told him everything. He was stunned, struggling to process what had happened. "Linda, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice full of regret. I shook my head. "It's okay. I've realized now that they'll never change. It's pointless to keep trying." Together, we made a decision: we would move out. A couple of weeks later, Jonathan's parents called. "So, what's the situation now? Have you finally left?" "I've been trying to reach Jonathan about the money, but he won't answer," I replied, my voice calm. "We've already moved out. You don't have to worry about me being around anymore." There was an unmistakable sense of triumph in their voices as they responded. "Ah, finally, now our son can be free from the burden of you." Hearing their laughter, I felt something unexpected: relief. They had lost control over us. We were free, and as Jonathan and I looked toward the future, I knew we had made the right decision. We no longer had to live under the weight of their expectations. It was time to start a new chapter, on our own terms.